about?
He's almost like the Lord, right? Sees everything. Hears everything. All right, Bibles, if you have them, go to 2 Samuel chapter 23 is where we're going to start. Now, I don't know how many of you love your Old Testament, okay? But if you love your Old Testament, you realize a lot of 2 Samuel, a lot of 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, a lot of that stuff matches up. So you will read, if you read straight through your Bible, you're going to read some of the same stories if you read 1st and 2nd Samuel, and you'll get them again in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And even 1st and 2nd Kings ties into the same group of people. So just a little bit of knowledge there as you read. Now tonight, we've got a little bit of heads up. I've got a little bit, I told you I ruined my thunder telling you who it was about. But tonight, many of you have probably never heard of a man by the name of Benaiah. Has anybody ever heard of the story of Benaiah? There's a couple people. All right. So I want to kind of set the stage with Benaiah and his life before I ever get into the lesson. So I hope tonight, hope not to drag this out. But I want you to see first how crazy this man is, okay? Benaiah is not your typical Sunday morning best dressed kind of guy, okay? He loves the Lord. He belongs to the Lord, but he is a warrior, okay? He is a strong warrior for the Lord. And so I want you to know this dude is absolutely crazy. If Benaiah was here tonight, he would definitely not, quote unquote, fit in. Okay? He would stand out as a warrior man, but he would also stand out because this guy is absolutely crazy in the choices that he makes. But I want you to understand this. There are some choices, look at me, listen to me, there are some choices that you make as a Christian that if the world sees them are absolutely crazy. And when you follow God in those situations, that's where God begins to work. Tonight, I hope when you look at Benaiah, you see a crazy man. But I also hope that you see a man who follows God, and because he follows God, God uses him when these situations arise and the choices that he makes. And that is my prayer for you tonight. Tonight, as you hear this lesson, my prayer is that you will follow God first and foremost for all your days. But in following God, when those situations come that the world looks at and say, hey, this is going to be bad. This isn't going to turn out good. That's when God shows up. And then that's when God works in your life. And that gives you a testimony. Tonight, we're going to look at the testimony of Benaiah. I've titled this lesson tonight, What is God building in you? What is God building in you? Hold your hand, if you will, in 2 Samuel. And I want to jump to the book of Psalm. You don't have to turn there if you don't want to. But I'm going to give you two verses real quick to start out. When we think about what God is doing or what God is building in your life. Psalm 32, chapter 8, says this. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. What in the world? Why is it important that God guide you with his eye? Why didn't he guide you with his hand? Or why didn't he lead you with his feet? Why is it important that God guides you with his eye? Here's what the Lord put on my heart. God sees every situation that you're in. God sees where you are today. And there may be some of you that are a little bit older in the youth group that are trying to figure out, what in the world am I supposed to do in life? When I was 18 years old, I did not know that. I didn't know the answer to that question, right? But here's what I trust. I trust that God would guide me, and he did. He looked down with his eyes, and he saw me, and he knew where I was, and he led my life. He taught me which way I needed to go. So tonight, I pray that verse speaks to you. Another verse real quick, Psalm 37 verses 23 and 24. It says this, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. So tonight, those two verses from Psalm tell me, and hopefully they'll tell you this. God knows exactly where you are. He knows what He wants to do with your life, and He wants to be the guide. He wants to be the leader of your life. So here's the question of the night. What is God building in you? You say, Pastor Jeffrey, I'm just a teenager. I do not care. What is God building? What is God doing with your life? What does God want you to do one day that will be extraordinary for Him? I want you to look at 2 Samuel chapter 23 now. Verses 20 through 23. Before I start, I want you to say tonight, I know that you sit here and say, Pastor Jeffrey, I don't know that God is calling me to be a pastor. And here's what I want to tell you. God's not calling everybody in this group to be preachers. God is calling everybody in this group to be faithful. You agree with me? Yeah. You agree with me? God's calling us to be faithful. So whether you are called to be a pastor or a soldier, you got to be faithful. Whether God's calling you to be a missionary on the field, you got to be faithful there. Wherever God takes you, you got to be faithful. The name Benaiah, here's what it translated. It means Jehovah has built. That is where we get the title of our message tonight. Jehovah has built. Jehovah has built in Benaiah's life a testimony for the world to see. Are you ready to see it? All right, I'm telling you, you're about to be introduced to a crazy dude. Okay? All right, here we go. 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse number 20. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who done many deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. Now take that in. That's going to be like the center of our message today. And he killed an Egyptian, a spectacular man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand. So he went to him with a staff, wrestled the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. These things Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, did, and won a name among the 3 mighty men. He was more honored than the 30, but he did not obtain the first 3. I will explain that. And David appointed him over his guard. Now, what in the world are we going to learn from this man's life tonight? How are we going to look at his life and see what God is doing? Now, Benaiah, we see, he starts out in a very particular place. So my first point in answering the question, what is God building in you? My first point tonight, and you will get 4 of them. My first point is, it starts with you. It starts with you. What God is building in you, it starts with you. What do you mean, Pastor Jeffrey? Look at verse number 20. We're just going to read the first part. Benaiah was the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel, who had done many deeds. Stop right there. I know it doesn't really pop out to you unless you dig in and begin to study, but Benaiah's dad, Jehoiada, was a priest. Okay? He was a priest. So Benaiah comes from a quote-unquote priestly family. And so he was a godly man, a chief priest for David. But also we are told here that Jehoiada was the son of a valiant man from Kabzeel. So not only was Jehoiada a godly man, but Jehoiada's dad, Benaiah's granddad, was a valiant, a godly man as well. And so we see the family lineage start to build. Let me ask you a question. How many of you are proud of your family? Proud of where you come from? I'm not going to ask you tonight if you're not proud, okay? But I want to tell you this. If you look at my tree, some of you would probably shake your head like, Jeffrey came from that? Here's what tonight I'm thankful for. I'm thankful tonight to be raised in a home from my mother and dad that insisted that church be a priority in my life. That one decision changed my life. That one decision changed my life. And so tonight I want you to know that Benaiah and Jehoiada had great foundation because of their faith. They came from the priestly family. And here's what should have happened. Benaiah should have been a priest. He should have been a preacher. Now I'm going to use my own two kids in this. There are many people that look at the preacher or the pastor through the sons. Right? And they look at Levi and they may look at Ethan and say, hey, your daddy was a preacher. You ought to be a preacher. Is that fair? Absolutely not. But what is fair is this. Is the foundation on which they get because I got that foundation, because my parents got that foundation, and that foundation rests upon God. I can't control what God's going to do with their life and the choices that those two boys are going to make. But what I can control is the foundation from where they start. Benaiah had a firm foundation in God. And I want you to know that it starts there. Benaiah had to make a decision whether to follow God or not. Tonight, I don't care who your mom and daddy is. I don't care what situation you come from. I don't care if your parents, you're here tonight and you say, my parents and my grandparents never go to church. It's got to start somewhere. And it starts with you. Does that make sense? It starts with the choices that you make. And tonight, every one of us has the same choice whether we will follow Jesus Christ or not. Now listen. Sometimes when we look at our past or our parents, we look in a physical way, you can see the connections. But I hope one day, when Jeffrey's long and gone, that people will look back and see the spiritual connections, not only that my physical boys have had, but that we have had. Right? You are my family. Do you understand that? You are important to me. And so I want you to know tonight that as you grow up, it's important to listen to your parents and obey your parents and honor your parents, but you have the choice to follow God. It is our individual choice to do that. You can't ride the coattails of your parents' decisions to heaven. You've got to make that decision for yourself. And so tonight, I challenge every one of you, you have to make the choice. Just as Benaiah had to make the choice, how am I going to follow God? And God done something crazy in his life. Point number one, it starts with you. What choices tonight will you make that will put you closer to the Lord? Point number two. Point number two is that you will have to face your fears. When God builds something in you, when God begins to grow you, when God begins to call you, when God begins to use you, you will eventually, at some point, have to face your fears. Now, I look at you and ask you as teenagers, what are you fearful of? I want to ask you one question, a specific question. How many of you, in some way, are fearful of what the future holds? I'm going to raise my hand. Because I don't know. When government changes and leaders change, so changes the world. I do not know what the future is going to hold for you. But here's tonight what I rest in. I know that my God holds my future. No matter what comes my way, I know that God is on my side. Point number two tonight, as we think about that, is you're going to have to face fears in your life. How many are fearful of standing in front of people? How many are fearful of telling somebody about Jesus? Raise your hand. Be honest. Yeah, we're fearful of that. Guys, listen tonight. You're going to have to face your fears. Look at the end of verse number 20. It says, Benaiah done many great deeds. He had killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. He also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. Verse 21, and he killed an Egyptian, a spectacular man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, and so he went down with him, a staff wrestled the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. There are 3 stories here that were given in just a couple verses about this man named Benaiah. He's known for 3 things that he did and a few more that we're going to talk about a little bit later. One of them, he killed 2 lion-like heroes of Moab. Now, what in the world is a lion-like hero of Moab? Well, it depends on where you look, what you get. But here's what I believe it is. Moab was just over the mountain, through the woods, next door to where he grew up. And they were an enemy. And so what I believe happened to Benaiah is this. Those 2 lion-like heroes of Moab were 2 of Moab's greatest soldiers, warriors, if you will. Okay? They were probably big in stature. They were known for things that they did in Moab. They had clout. They had a name for themselves. And guess what? Benaiah killed both of them at one time. Now you say, oh, Pastor Jeffrey, that's just a great story. No, that's a remarkable feat because of God. The second story that we're told about Benaiah, and this is the one that I find very, very interesting of a story, because it has a couple of things that we can read into. Look at verse number 20 again. It says, he also had gone down and killed a lion in the midst of a pit on a snowy day. Now, it's three parts to this one story, okay? What are the 3 things he did? What did he do? He killed a lion. What in the world are you thinking? Have any of you ever seen a lion?
Yes.
The closest thing I did was at a zoo, okay? And I'm thankful we were behind the glass.
National Geographic.
You see on TV, okay? Right? But I think if you're face to face with a lion, it would be a very different story. So not only Benaiah kills a lion, what's the second part of the story?
In a big pit.
In a big pit. So however or whatever the circumstances, it's unknown here. But whether that lion was trapped, whether that lion fell in a pit, whether that lion was put in a pit, however that lion got in a pit, he's trapped. He can't get out. This crazy joker then gone down in a pit with him to fight a lion. So he's not only killed a lion, he's been willing to go get in the territory or go to the territory of the lion. What's the third part of the story?
It's a snowy day.
On a snowy day. Now we scratch our head and say, what kind of mess is this? Right? What in the world are we talking about? This crazy guy has killed a lion. He's gotten down in a pit with the lion and in containment with the lion. He's chosen to do that, and it's snowing. The worst circumstances ever, and he kills the lion. I'm going to come back to this story, don't worry. The third story is what? Is that of an Egyptian. And you see in verse 21, it says he killed an Egyptian, a spectacular man. What that means is not that he was good looking. It means that he was tall. So he killed a giant of a man. Okay? An Egyptian giant, a spectacular, a guy that was probably 7.5 to 9 feet tall. Okay? And this Egyptian, not only did he kill him, what did he do?
He killed him with his own.
He killed him with his own spear. The Egyptian had a spear. He basically had a club in his hand, a staff in his hand. And he went down there and he took the spear from the guy and he killed him. Now let me ask you, if you have heard about this guy, if you were living in the day, what would you think of this guy? I don't want to mess with him, right? I do not want to mess with him. I would think one of 2 things. This guy is absolutely crazy and I'm not messing with him, or everybody else is lying. They're lying about these stories. He couldn't have done that. Now listen to me. You've got to stay with me here. How many people think the same thing about your God? When they look at you, they either look at you and say, man, God is doing some amazing things. You serve a great God. You serve an amazing God. God is doing great things in your life. There are going to be people that look at your life like that. And then there are going to be people that look at your life and say, you're foolish. Your God's a lie. I don't believe it. I don't believe your stories. I don't believe what your God is doing. It's all made up. I don't think I'm man enough to have looked Benaiah in the eye and say, hey, you're lying. But point number 2 tonight is, how are you going to face your fears? Let me ask you a question. Everybody looking at me real quick. How many of your fears involve another person? How many of you have fears that involve somebody else? Whether it's criticism, whether it's judgment, whether it's afraid of what the world's going to be like, it involves people. Most of your fears, listen to me, most of your fears are going to involve somebody else. So, what are you going to do with your fears? You've got one or two choices. You're either going to face your fears or you're going to run from them. Tonight I'm going to ask you a question. Where does God get glory when you face your fears? Does God get glory from us running from them? Caving into our fears? Does God get glory there? No. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Sometimes my faith is not strong enough to face my fears. The most fearful thing, one of the most fearful things in the world, I have to believe, is a lion. There was no way I would choose to come face to face in a pit on a snowy day and choose to fight a fear. But tonight I'm going to ask you this. What does your lion look like? Are we having company?
Yeah. Jeffrey, a squirrel trying to watch your lesson.
I see that, right?
We got friends.
All right, listen to me right here. Listen to me. Listen to me. Good thing that's not a lion, right? Listen to me. As we think of these 3 stories, I think of who's crazy enough to run into a pit, fight a lion, and kill him on a snowy day. I also look at the life of David and say, who's crazy enough to go against a giant with a slingshot? I look at a lot of these Old Testament truths. I'm not going to say stories. They're truths. And tell you this. What is the common denominator as they face their fears? They're outmatched. But who is on their side? God. Hey, everybody look at me real quick. Do you know that you have God on your side? Tonight, look, I don't know what your fear is. I don't know what your lion is. I don't know what you're wrestling with. I don't know what you're fighting. I don't know what's feeling like it's defeating you. But listen to me. Listen. You have to understand that if you believe in God, He is on your side. No matter what happens, no matter if the lion comes, and no matter if you have to go in the pit, no matter if it's snowing on the day that you choose to fight this lion, God is there. I want you to know it was not Benaiah in his own strength that killed the lion or the Egyptian or the 2 Moab soldiers. It was God with him that did that. As we talk about what God is building in you, I want you to do me a favor and look at Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6 real quick. If you can turn there or flip there. If not, just listen. I know some of you don't have Bibles, but I want you to listen to this verse. Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12. Here's what that verse says. Are you ready? Listen, turn your ears on. Listen to this verse. It says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness in this age. How many of you know that we wrestle against things that are not on our own, right? We wrestle against things that we always cannot see. I want you to know that in the Scripture as well, who is referred to as a lion? Now you may say Jesus. Jesus is referred to the Lion of Judah, right? But who is roaring and ravaging the world like a lion? Satan is. Satan is our lion, guys. Listen to me, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, when you follow God, you will eventually come face to face with that lion. If you are working and serving and following God, you will come face to face with a lion. He is devouring people. He is devouring Christians. So look at me, every one of you. You have a lion to face. Every single day you will face a lion, and that lion is Satan. And he wants to kill you. He wants to devour you. He wants to tear you to pieces, and he wants to get rid of your God. He wants to destroy your testimony. So guys, I want you to understand, you may not face a physical lion, but spiritually, every single day, you will face Satan. And it's a battle that you will not win unless God is on your side. Point number 2 tonight. Are you going to face your fears knowing that if you follow God, you will run into Satan himself? Tonight, I ask you, how strong is your faith? Is it strong enough to face that lion that you will see? I look at this man. I told you he was crazy, right? But do you see how God is working in his life? I'm going to jump a little bit here on this next point, and I'm going to come back, okay? I'm going to jump to 1 Kings chapter 1. So 1 Kings is the next book over. If you flip just a couple of pages, you should be there. 1 Kings chapter number 1. Point number 3 tonight, as you think of what God is building in you, point number 3 is this. My prayer is he's building loyalty to the king. Point number 3 is loyalty to the king. 1 Kings chapter 1, look at verse number 10. I want to explain something before I read this verse, okay? So you got David now that is failing in health, and you will see here in the beginning of 1 Kings that David will die, okay? The next appointed king by God is who? Does anybody know? Solomon. Good job. Solomon is the next chosen king, but there is another son of David that wants that kingship, that wants that job. And anybody know his name? Good guess, no. Adoniah. So Adoniah is son number 4 from David, and he wants the position of king. But here's what has to happen. Because of the fighting and because of the back door trying to get the kingship, here's what happens. David dies, Solomon becomes king, and you know what Solomon has to do to his brother? He orders him to be killed. Now you look at me and like, gosh, that's horrible. But that's the way that it had to work according to God's plan. Here's the first point I want to show you in Scripture. You have Adoniah and Solomon. You have the two courts vying for the kingship, right? Look at 1 Kings chapter number 1, verse number 10. Go back to verse number 9. I want to start there. It says this: And Adoniah sacrificed sheep and oxen and fattened the cattle by the stone of Zoheleth, which is by Enrogel, which also invited all his brother, the king's sons, and all the men of Judah, the king's servants. So here's what happens. Adoniah is getting his party in order to become the king, right? But look at verse number 10. It says this: But he did not invite Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the mighty man, or Solomon his brother. Now stay with me here. Stay with me. Benaiah's not invited to the party. Okay? He's not invited to Adoniah's party. Now, jump with me to 1 Kings chapter number 2, verse 25. In chapter number 2, you see that David dies. And in verse number 25, here's what happens. So King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah the son of Jehoiada and struck him down, and he died. Who is the person that killed Adoniah? Benaiah. This same mighty man, this same crazy dude that was so faithful to David, so faithful to God, stayed faithful to God's plan and David's plan, and he supported Solomon. That's who God wanted. That's who God chose to be the next king. And it brought him against Adoniah in such a way that he was the one chosen to kill him. Now you say, Pastor Jeffrey, all this killing got me worked up. Guys, that's how it worked in the Old Testament, okay? That's how God moved and God's plans were carried out in the Old Testament. But listen to me. I don't want you to miss this point. He could have very easily caved in and followed Adoniah and all that Adoniah wanted and fell into that regime. But by staying faithful to God and His plan, Adoniah was made chief over the military for Solomon. So he got a promotion. He was loyal. He was loyal to his king. You say, Pastor Jeffrey, we don't have a king. I've got a king. I've got a king. And listen, guys, there is the fight that's going on. There's a fight that's going on for your testimony, for your witness, for your soul, for your future, for your eternity. Who will you be loyal to? Will you be loyal to your king? King Jesus? That's my question. I want you to see in 1 Kings, I want you to see Benaiah's loyalty to David and to Solomon and to the plan of God. Gave him a promotion, right? But it also put him in position to continue to serve. Now, you may look at the whole military thing and not understand that, but I'm going to get to that in just 1 second. Go back to 2 Samuel chapter 23. As I give you my last point tonight out of this lesson, here's what I want to look at. I want to look at verses 22 and 23. It says, "These things Benaiah the son of Jehoiada did, and won a name among 3 mighty men." I want you to underline, I want you to star that won a name. Do you see that? He won a name among the 3 mighty men. He was more honored than the 30, but he did not attain the first 3, and David appointed him over his guard. I know this is maybe confusing to you, but here's what happened. Benaiah, he began to make a name for himself by the things that he was doing, the choices that he was made, the way that God was leading him. He made a name for himself. Now listen, I will say this. I do not want to make a name for Jeffrey Campbell. Okay? I'm not here to make a name for me. But listen, there are sometimes people know you, whether you want them to or not. Right? I went to get my eyes checked this morning. I went to the doctor, and there was a girl there. She was in a mask. I didn't recognize her. She said, "Hey, I know you from church." She must have picked out my bald head because I had a mask on, right? Listen to me. Whether you realize it or not, people know you. Okay? They know what you're about. They know who your parents are. They know your background. They know where you come from. Listen to me. Do they know your God? That's all I want known from me. As he makes a name for himself, here's what happens. It says he was known among the mightiest 3 men. But verse number 23 says this. He was more honored than the 30, but he did not attain the first 3. Do you see that? So here's what happened. David had his army. And then he had the 3 of the mightiest men serve as leaders. The 3 of the mightiest warriors that he had would be the leaders of his army. And it took 3 mighty men to lead the army of David. Now under those 3 were 30 more leaders, 30 more mighty men that served and were loyal to David and that commanded the armies of David. Does that make sense? It's kind of a hierarchy. It's David, it's 3 men, and then it's 30 other leaders of this army. Verse 23 says he was mighty. He was known, well known to be one of the 3 mightiest men, but guess what? He didn't get the job. He had to settle for being one of the 30 instead of one of the 3. Did that change what he did? Absolutely not. He still served his king. He still served his Lord, no matter who or no matter what position that he had. Now stay with me here. Stay with me. When you look at that, as a leader of one of the 30, he still had 24,000 troops that he was responsible for. Can you imagine being that kind of leader? No, that's a big job, right? Point number 4 tonight is this. What God is building in you, He's building your story. Point number 4 is simply your story, right? And there are going to be people that look at your story and they say, just like they look at Benaiah, and they say, Benaiah, he killed some mighty men, and he killed a lion, and he killed a giant, and he killed his boss's brother. He killed Solomon's brother. He should have been one of the 3. But he wasn't. He fell in the group of 30 and continued to serve and continue to work and continue to do what he needed to do. Now let me ask you this. Tonight, as we look at our story is so different. My story is not going to match up to yours. Right? And I wrote down in my lesson tonight that I've got a twin brother. Many of you know that. And we're not really look-alike. He got the height, the hair, the good looks. He got everything. He got the muscles. He got it all, right? But listen. My brother tonight is in Colorado in the Air Force. And his story is kind of like the story of Benaiah, right? God has taken him all over Afghanistan, put him in wars and battles, allowed him to fight for his country, allowed him to serve for 20 years. That's his story. And my story didn't go anywhere but Amherst County, Virginia. But does God need both stories? Absolutely. He fought for a country. Hopefully people see me fighting for my Lord. And hopefully he is too. Like, what's your story? I hate to do this, but I want to. If you could be known for one thing and one thing alone, what would it be? You know what Benaiah is known for? Type his name in Google, and you're going to see killing a lion in a pit on a snowy day. But if you begin to dig into his life, you see a story that is full of faith and full of loyalty and full of commitment to his God. Tonight, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known for? I don't need my name in lights. I don't want to be known as anything. Hopefully when you look at me, or when somebody talks about me, or maybe one day you can speak a good word for me and say, Jeffrey just wants to serve the Lord. the very best that he can as youth pastor of Clifford Baptist Church. My story involves making a difference in your life, I hope. It doesn't involve killing a lion. That's not my story. That's Benaiah's story. But my story, what we have in common with Benaiah is this. I want to be faithful. I want to be faithful in what God calls me to do, just like he was faithful to what God called him to do. Tonight, what is God building in you? As I close, here's what I want you to think about. What fear tonight, what fear do you need to trust God with? As you get up and walk away tonight, what fear do you need to trust God with? How will each one of us stay trusting in God, stay faithful and loyal to our God, no matter what comes? If God were to look down on us today, will he find us faithful and loyal to him? That's the question. Tonight, look at me. Everyone, I'm done. Look at me. Look at me. God is writing your story. But it involves you being faithful to him for that story to be played out. For people to come to know him. For people to be impacted by God. You've got to be faithful to your story and to your God. I'm done. What's keeping us from doing that? What's keeping us from being faithful? Is it a fear? Is it our background? Is it our family? Is it decisions? What's keeping us from being faithful? Any questions? Tonight, my prayer is this: God's working in every one of you. Guys, I'm going to get one of you to hit that button, please. Thank you.